talk between arts and science. This talk is called, I translate it very freely into English because it's a German title. It's translated Auf dreaming fish in the test tube, von träumenden Fischen im Reagenzglas in German. And this is the first talk in a series of 3 happening today, tomorrow, and on Friday. And my name is Alexandra Frusdorfer, and together with my colleague Alina Violetta Leitner, and in collaboration with the Angewandte Innovation Lab, we organized those talks as accompanying program to an exhibition at the AIL, the Angewandte Innovation Lab, which will go fully online on all media by the end of the week. Yeah, we're happy to have this first format to introduce some parts of the projects and the artists represented also in the website project, which is a virtual exhibition. It was planned as an analog exhibition first, but due to COVID, it's now virtual. Yes, so today, those 3 talks, today, tomorrow, and the day after, will revolve around transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary work, around people, artists, and scientists who work between arts and science on borders between disciplines. And this will be also the focus of our conversation today. We welcome Solmaz Farhang, an artist, illustrator, arts and science graduate who works very much in the interdisciplinary field. Margit Busch, also arts and science graduate, biologist, artist, also kind of hovering between worlds, and Markus Schmidt from Biofaction, working in science communication, but also a biologist. So we hope we can give the audience with this format a glimpse into what it means to work between disciplines. And first of all, we will invite the participating artists and scientists to present some of the work, present themselves in a short introduction, starting with Solmaz Farhang, and then we open the format to a conversation between the 3 of them. So please, Solmaz, you're welcome to start with the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Alexandra, for the nice introduction. My name is Solmaz Farhang. I studied graphic design and illustration, and then I studied art and science at the University of Angewandte. And my work is I usually I am interested in the between as you said, interdisciplinary projects, and in my recent work that is presented at the exhibition, may I introduce AILien, as you said, with Alexandra, and curated with Alexandra and Violetta. I am revisiting a project that I did during my study. In this project, I had the chance to go to the laboratory of fish study, and it centers around what does that mean to be, and the duality of being an outsider and an insider. And in the first days that I was there, it was basically the process of getting into the laboratory life and seeing what is it to be seen and to see at the same time. Yeah. So here are, for example, the look to the fish larvae life, and I met there both live fish larvae and dead fish larvae, and the correlation that I found, and the relationship that I found between myself and the immigratory fishes there in the Danube. And additionally, I tried to kind of make a connection with the fish larvae and see what would they see from their side in this relationship. Yeah. So I hand over to Margit. Yeah, thank you.
Margit, maybe also for the audience, because Solmaz, you kept it quite short, to give a bit of more of your background also, maybe also your work philosophy. Just tell us a little bit so that people get to know you a little bit.
I'm gonna try. So, as already mentioned, my name is Margit Busch. I'm studied biology before. This is really a long time ago, but in my heart, I still feel like a biologist because I'm very interested in everything what is nature. But then there was also something missing. I felt restricted in this scientific realm, and so I was always connected to art. And then very much later, I discovered the study program in Vienna, this art and science. I thought this will be my home because I always felt at the border between those two or in the border region. So yeah, and they accepted me, although already being a bit older, and it was my home. I really felt perfectly well there because it gave me the freedom to look at things how I think it's good to look at him, or and to maybe also to invent own methods without being restricted from a discipline. But there we come to what I'm working about, because in my diploma, in my master work, I introduced a new discipline, which I call transsciency, and which would give a home to people who are in this border area. And currently I'm working on a project which is called A Garden for Fish. And this deals, now I also try to give a picture. What happened here? This is the fish I'm working on. It's called Danio rario. It's a zebrafish. And this is used as a model organism in many laboratories. And I'm interested, maybe I have shortly another picture. Oops. So you find them in many laboratories distributed over the world. And I have them in my home, which you can see, maybe there's an aquarium in the background. And I try to treat them, yeah, they are not my pets, but I observe them sometimes like a scientist, sometimes like somebody, a hobby aquarist. And from the fish, departing from the fish, I try to, I see what ways develop. There's a landscape developing, because going out from the fish, you find a lot of interesting subjects. And I would like to know as much as possible about different environments of the fish. This is a bit related to a philosophy of Uexküll, who said an organism can't never regard it without his environment, Umwelt. So, yep. And I'm writing a blog about this because I think the garden is something processual. It's not something static, and a blog fits to that processual idea. And garden is also a bit like I would like to have where I can communicate as much as possible with the fish. To learn as much as possible about the fish, also, and not in like the scientists learn through the fish, because they want to see general mechanisms. But I would like to learn about the fish or with the fish.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think that's sufficient.
So thank you. And Markus, you are last but not least for your personal introduction. Talk a bit about where you come from, what's your background, what you do at the moment, your point of focus in your work, also where you see yourself. You are, of course, you have a design as a science communication agency. So this would be interesting to see what's kind of to move from and more rather the artist point of view from Solmaz, hovering over Margit, who's very much between being a scientist and an artist, to a rather maybe science-based practice in your case.
Mm-hmm. So I was trained as a biomedical engineer. So it's a kind of an interface between electronic engineering and biology and medicine. So all the things, all the machines in the hospital that measure heart rate and, you know, diagnostic machines and so on. So already in my training, I was kind of exposed to these two different disciplines and the different ways that are thought and conceived in these different disciplines. And later on, I kind of transferred to environmental risk assessment and started to look into GMOs and then environmental risks. But what I always found quite kind of puzzling and even frustrating is that in classical biology, the main kind of way to approach nature is in a very descriptive or analytical approach, okay? And according to James Danieli from the 1970s, he said that science usually follows 3 steps. So first, it's descriptive. You just describe what's going on. And you want to find out how it works. So there's an analytical stage. And then when you think you have understood it to a certain extent, you start to create something. There's a synthetic level. So in physics, you know, we build bridges, or, you know, we know the laws of physics and are good enough in understanding that we can create something that actually works in the real world. In chemistry, we have synthetic chemistry, creating molecules that never existed in nature. And right now we see a transition in biology from a more analytical to a synthetic biology situation. And I found it interesting coming from engineering and also from biology to see, so what are the kind of, what's the process? What are the motivations? What are the visions? What can be created in biology? So in the search for ideas, so in search for different concepts of what could be done with these new possibilities, I kind of, you know, found that artists are also interested in biology as a medium for artistic expression. And I think their contribution can be very interesting to, you know, to enlarge and to diversify the way we think about possible synthetic biologies or biological futures. So usually kind of from industry or from science, there's a bit more of the same, I have to say, comparable to, for example, the first cars. When you look at the first cars, they look very much like the horse cars, the carts, you know, there were horses in front and then were the car. And when they put in the first motor, they still looked like the horse car without the horses. So it's very much close to what we've done in the past, but there's so much more possible. And about 10 years ago, I wrote an article about xenobiology, which is the biology of strange things, which is life as it could be. And this is really, I think, a very interesting concept, an alien form of life. Because I remember when I was sitting in the university and the professor told about DNA and RNA and was drawing the chemical formula, I thought, why does it look exactly this way? Are there other forms of nucleic acids, chemical structures possible to do the same job? But the inherited wisdom in biology is that nature is the ultimate truth machine that has found, you know, the only possible way to do it. And I think that's blatantly wrong. There are many more possibilities, and to explore this, to navigate through this, you know, oceans of potential biology is the thing that is going to be done in the future. And I think that artists can play a big role in that, to help explore and charter this this new mappa mundi of biology. Yeah, and right now in our work, I have to say, we're doing science communication, but not as a PR agency. We are very much interested in democratization of knowledge. So we think that you know, many things in synthetic biology, they're only known to a few experts and scientists out there in the world, and it's a critical phase in making decisions of in which way this is going to develop. And so we want that more people know about this development and become part of the decision-making process. So the science communication is also a democratic, is done in order to enable better democratic deliberation about decisions about this very powerful technology. And we have also done so far 6 artists in residency programs with collaborating science institutes all over Europe. And right now we have a call for 4 more paid artists in residency positions, each one with €7,000 Still, you can apply. If anybody's interested, until the end of the month, you can go to our website at biofaction.com and look at the call and apply for one of these residencies.
Okay, thank you. Good to know, maybe also for the audience interesting. I think I will just pick up a few words you dropped and will guide to the first question. I will just start with Solmas because she started also the introduction. Marcus talked about democratic processes, which is also, I think, very much about access to processes, access to knowledge. Just connecting to the name of our exhibition, which is about alienness in different forms, in a variety of forms. My first question would be, like, our exhibition is called "May I Introduce Alien?" Darf ich vorstellen Alien? Or the kind of dual interpretation of it, darf ich den Alien einführen? Can I bring the alien into another surrounding? So my first question would be, who is more alien? Is it the artist in the lab, or is it the scientist in art? How do you see it, Solmas? How do you experience it?
Yeah, that's a very nice question. It is very difficult to say because and that's really good to think about that. Okay, as much as that I felt alien or a stranger in the laboratory, they would also may feel as an outsider and alien in my studio, and when they come to maybe to art galleries. I quite often have heard that when scientists or people outside art say that, oh, I feel uncomfortable, or I cannot understand that. When I ask why you don't, they say, yeah, I cannot understand it. So clearly, it is there is this gap, or there is this moment that you feel as like a stranger, and the interesting thing for me is how with which discipline or which strategies we try to bridge these gaps. And for example, in this work that I did, it was really about like when you enter a place that you don't know and you feel like a stranger, you more can feel the gaze or the look to you, and also at the same time you are more looking at, and because everything is new and you want to discover, and it's like, as I said, first I entered, it was like a tourist taking photos, but then you go deeper and deeper to understand what's going around you. So it's really difficult who is the more alien, but I think that's from both sides. You're right. So yeah.
So you don't, of course it's hard for you to tell because you're not the scientist who is the alien in the studio,
Yeah.
but you have the feeling it does not one discipline who has more difficulties diving into other disciplines. Do you think it's a quite balanced, the challenges are quite balanced, or do you see it easier for artists to dive into science, or for scientists to find a place in art?
I think when you enter the lab, then there is it may be not it may be quite similar, but I think it's more difficult for artists to get in touch with scientists, and also to the thing that you get to be to take seriously what you are doing there. It's more, I think, the distance and the image that science field has from art is kind of, it varies, like it can be that this strange world, this fun, cool, sometimes strange world that they may like to interfere with, or some of them like to help. And it can be also like in the direction of science communication, which is the image that they have, which is also interesting talk about, but yeah, that's different. Yeah.
I just want to pick up some aspects you mentioned because you said it's difficult to enter the lab, and this would be something which would interest me, Margit. I remember one from an interview with she's actually a synthetic biology artist. Her name is Daisy Ginsberg. And in an interview situation, her interviewer asked, how do you decide which experts you work with? And she just said very honestly, the ones that respond to my emails. How do you experience this if you get in touch with scientists, or if you, of course, sometimes you have a plan, you have an aim, you have a main interest. Of course, there is the perfect scientist in your head you want to approach. How do you convince people to work together with you, or is it more kind of what happens?
Yeah, so I made several attempts. There was a talk of Andrea Pauli. She's here in Vienna. She's working with zebrafish, and it was a public science education thing. And I asked her if I could visit the lab. She said, yes, write me an email. I wrote her an email. I never got an answer. So sometimes, as Sama said, to be taken serious as an artist for the scientist is not so easy if you not really deal with the stuff, which it might be the case in Marcus' scenarios, which he described. But as I'm interested from the zebrafish from another perspective, this could also be a kind of concurrence or like questioning the methods of the scientists, which is not so nice for a scientist. So this could also be a danger. But I think that was not the reason why she didn't answer. I think they receive emails like hell, so they don't. But because you asked me if there's one scientist I really would like to meet, this is Christiane Nüßlein-Vollert. She's a Nobel Prize laureate, and she is based in Tübingen, the town where I come from. And I'm looking for methods. I already have been to the fish facility there, and I was talking to a staff member, and he said, I asked him, what do I have to do if I would like to enter the fish facility? And he said, ask the boss. And the boss is Christiane Nüßlein-Vollert. So she's 80, but she's also interested in aesthetic ideas. She wrote a book, Die Schönheit der Tiere. So I think there could be some what's it called, Schnittmengen? Some
overlapping.
Some overlapping areas, and that I think is the main thing. What is interesting if you approach a scientist. So I know a couple of scientists. They don't work with zebrafish, but they're friends of mine. So it's easy to talk together. But if you don't, you have to search for common things. And so I could always stress the differences. Like I would say for a synthetic biologist, maybe I would have a lot of philosophical questions, but maybe not the method as such is not so interesting for me. But with Christiane Nüßlein-Vollert, I would think I could share something like philosophical questions maybe. Yeah, and I will not stop to approach her. I will try it again and again. I already wrote her a letter because I thought, okay, another age and so many emails, a letter might be a good thing. And I even created a stamp with a zebrafish on site. You can order stamps at the post office with your own design. But then this COVID stuff came, and so I think it was a little bit anyway too. But I go to Tübingen again, and I will go to the fish facility again to ask.
So persistency is your method.
Yeah, persistency, I think so. Because I also asked Ruben, who I proposed to be a partner when you had a different concept. And I asked him, what do I have to do? And he said, you can write 3 times. Because you don't want to be too persistent, that you unnerve the people. So, but 3 times he said, you can.
So just connecting to this thought, Marcus, you act very much on the border of this. I think maybe you kind of feel some of those stories already and have your own experience, because you also work together with artists, as you said, in your residency programs. where do you see the challenges, not only for artists, but of course we are very much talking from an arts point of view, approaching science rather than the opposite. Where do you see the challenges, not only on an intellectual level, but also a political level, to approach or to make those interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary projects possible?
I think, first of all, the life science is a very, very competitive arena, and the labs are competing for funding. They're like have to publish or perish. So they're under a lot of pressure, and it depends very much how established the PI, the principal investigator, the boss of the lab is, and how much interest there is also in other things. So the moment where there's, I think where there's some kind of established and they don't have to like fight for their lives, I think there would be room for some additional things that are not streamlined in their scientific work. You have to understand that every time a scientist is coming, this is a kind of interruption. And on the short term, or maybe even the midterm, this interruption might not necessarily be a good thing, but it could become a kind of an input that also, changes the course of the scientific process over the long term. But you have to be open for that. And so it depends. Is there some time and some willingness to engage in this endeavor? PI could lose time, or the people could lose time in just explaining someone from outside what they're doing. They could rather do an experiment instead. So there must be some kind of willingness to host an artist. And if the artist you said, the guy who responds, or the scientists who respond to my emails are the ones I work with, I mean, it's a little bit like that. You have to have some kind of interest. And so what I do, I explain what this artist in residence is all about. Now that we have a couple of examples, we can show how this worked in the past. So I have reference from other scientists, and so the scientists are talking to other scientists that had the same experience. So this, I think, helps to kind of lower the barrier. But of course, I mean, the PI has to be interested, has to be curious. If there's still a childlike curiosity left at that level, I think then it might be a good opportunity. The artists that come to the lab can have the role of a jester, like the Hofnarr. And the Hofnarr is the jester is there to make fun, to entertain, but also to ask question and to put a mirror to the king. So it's the only one who is allowed to say things that no one else can say. There's some kind of freedom, and this kind of challenge can be good for the science to develop further. In the best of cases, there are also cases where it doesn't work and it's just a waste of time. But in the best of cases, this can be very interesting. And I guess that also the lab has to have a certain size. So, for example, Joe Davis is kind of like the grandfather of bioart. He works in the lab at Harvard with George Church, and they have about 70 or even 100 people. And he's like, there's one artist. And so he's the way he messes up things in a good sense, and I say, is fine when you have like a big lab. So, but if you have only 5 people and someone is coming and messing up everything, then everything is messed up. So it has to be in proportion to keep the lab running, but still have some kind of interesting input and interactivity.
I think the topic of resources is very interesting, because it was also in my case, tomorrow we talk with Judith Benz-Schwarzburg, who is a scientist working in cognitive biology. And we talked with her before also about this, what's the challenges on a kind of systemic level, on a political level. And she said something interesting about the pressure in academia, as you said. The pressure to specialize, and interdisciplinary work and transdisciplinary work is always kind of a bit in opposition to specializing in a very scientific matter where you have a goal in front of you. I would frame it like this, that if I work together with with scientists, it's very much about the process and not so much about the result in the first place. And in classic scientific academia, it's very much about the result. So she also said she's very much interested in collaborating with artists. And she said she tried several times to submitting a concept with artists for a longer interdisciplinary project, and she said it just fails because it's not specializing enough to gain results in the end. So yeah, I don't know how to frame a question from this, but I just wanted to connect to the things that Marcus said about resources, also in academia, and resources for work like this. Have you, Solmaz or Margit, have you experienced something similar where you said, okay, we tried to set up a project together with scientists and it was really difficult? And yeah, how do you see this? How do you feel about this?
I think from it differs when you have it, as you say, when you are very specialized on what the result is, then it's easier to get into contact. I have an experience in science, this illustration hub that we ran in 2016 at the Angewandte, and we try to bring scientists and artists together, PhD students and artists, and there was this willingness to work together because the result was almost defined from the beginnings, that at the end of the semester there will be a presentation in an art form, different art forms through these collaborations. And I have the feeling as soon as you have this clarification of publication, you know, so it's kind of, then it gets easier to bring them together. And we have this, it's not only about the science and art. I think in the art field itself, I always also felt like under pressure to get into, to be more specialized. Yeah, are you an illustrator, or are you a video maker, or are you a photographer? So it's, I think we have the same issue, and gradually I think we all feel the urge to like, it doesn't work really well in this very specialized way, and we constantly are trying to break out, and I think that's where we can find new solutions, I think, for the problems that we now are confronting, actually. Yeah. And I don't know, how is it with Margit? So,
yeah, I could add something from art and science, because there it was like it was always the plan that you bring science and scientists and artists together, and I could observe different motivations, like from the scientific side. Like once it was to have a little bit, something else, but that was, as Marcus said, also already somebody who is established and was maybe already a bit bored. And on the other hand, there was somebody who would have liked to have a little bit of advertisement for ecological issues. So it was never so much, because I'm very much interested in epistemological questions. And this is the thing where scientists are not so much interested, because they have their method. And this is fixed. And if I come and say, maybe we could use another method, another Weltanschauung, another way to look at the world, then you come, if you are not at a super high level scientist, you come to problems. But as Solmaz said, I would also underline that if you have something which is clear that there will be an outcome, there will be an exhibition which is recognized in the public and which has some importance, then people would have a motivation. Because now there are sometimes coming some areas, like if Marcus, you organize this artist in residence program in Stuttgart, I know there's Schloss Solitude, have some things like art, science and business. And I was their guest as a symposium which was called Rhythm Analysis. And I thought super interesting. They invited people from different disciplines, like a biologist, an ethnologist, somebody from economics, and so on. And they all had a talk about rhythm. I thought this was perfect. Therefore, also sharing a subject, like sharing something and looking at the different perspectives. But this has to be acknowledged from somewhere, like let's say in monetary or whatever. Yeah. Things like you need some acknowledgement or recognition.
Mm-hmm. Also maybe a stage, a platform, visibility, and room spaces to not only for collaboration but for confrontation also, because to me it's interesting because we talk so much about collaboration, working together, and this will be something which we talk a bit more about on Friday. The difference or the value of spaces for collaboration and the value of spaces for confrontation, because sometimes collaboration also means compromises and means you have to maybe follow rules, follow other rules than the ones you think are right. As Margit said, you said when you look at work or at the topic from your scientist's perspective, you have the feeling you have to follow rules or criteria to follow a specific method, and the arts, your arts point of view gives you the freedom to approach it in a way that you think it's right from an ideological point of view, maybe. So this I find interesting to like how also that ideology and different ideology is good to have a place in maybe this body of challenges to work between those disciplines. Just wanted to wrap this up with another thought. So one other question I would ask Markus is, because you work in science communication, but you also, the way you described it before, talk about arts as research. Do you feel that there is a kind of, how is the perception, because I face it also very often, that from a scientific point of view, there is a certain perception about what arts in science means. Of course, the very kind of conservative view of beautifying things, taking science and making art from it, rather than making science through art. How do you see there is a distinction between science communication and arts as research?
I think you can understand science communication in many different ways. Communication can go is usually in both directions, so that's kind of the ideal form of communication. What you described is kind of like the simplest way to involve an artist in a scientific environment is to just ask them, hang up beautiful pictures of a microscope, or just this an aesthetification of the scientific work. And there are actually really some very nice pictures from different forms of microscopes. So it's not to say that it's not interesting, but it doesn't interact with science on a deeper level. It's kind of a bit superficial, and everything kind of remains the same. It's just nice pictures up there, and people feel a bit more uplifted when they go to the job. So kind of this is the level one. The level two interaction will be to kind of more that the artist starts to ask questions. What is going on here, and what is your kind of the way the practices are done in the lab, and then uses this information also to influence and to inform their approach to do the artwork. So the artwork is not just a kind of a depiction of a descriptive depiction of what's going on, but influences kind of really the thought process that goes into the art. And the better is if science, the scientists and the artists really communicate on the same level, on the same eye level, so to say, then I think this is the most the optimal way to have an interaction, but this is difficult. I mean, the artist is coming as a freelancer into an established lab where you have kind of a not feudal structure, but it's a kind of a hierarchy, and so to accept the artist as to work on the same level is already not so easy in the first place, and there is a kind of a questioning and stuff, but that's kind of part of the game, and usually it works out well. So I have to say an observation that we made in our residencies is that even though the PI, kind of the boss of the lab, is interested, so what he does is he brings the artist to one of their regular meetings, and the artist presents their work, who they are, and what they're planning to do. And usually there are some people in the lab, which could be postdocs or PhD students, that kind of feel the connection, and they actually self-select themselves to go to the artist and start this interaction. So we never know who is actually really, for the weeks that the artist is spending in the lab, going to interact with the artist. Is the PI is kind of the one who gives the okay, so that his or her people can interact, and it's okay to spend some time with them. But there are some people who come up, and then this interaction is kind of very, very free and uncertain what's the outcome is, which is really good, I think. So you cannot predict the interaction. At some point, the one PI was kind of semi-joking to me and saying, well, you have to take care, but one of my postdocs is going too much to work with the artist and is neglecting his work, because he really started to get interested in collaborating with the artist. So there's this time and resource issue. But I think the outcome is very open. And I think also even in science, what you would say, it's kind of, you do research and you want to find out stuff. But still there is a lot of pressure. And also, if you get a grant, there's some expectations on the kind of outcomes. So and also for example, we do a lot of European Commission granted research projects, and 10 years ago they were very open, and over the years, in each like 5-year plan, they become more streamlined, and now it goes more into product development, research for product development, and there kind of the freedom gets more limited. It's not totally limited, but it's more limited than in the past. And with the artists, actually, it's again a possibility also for the scientists to like step out of this kind of like streamlined way of working and do something extraordinary, right? So I give one last example. We had in 2011 an exhibition at the Museum of Natural History, and a biochemist worked with an artist. And what he done is they have this famous experiment from the 1950s, the Urey-Miller experiment, where he demonstrated how biochemical molecules can be created just with water, some acids, and electric sparks. This is kind of the primordial soup that is where life can emerge. And so he wanted to replicate this experiment, but with the current atmosphere of the Earth. So what would happen if you, from tomorrow, there would be no life? Could life emerge again? And all his colleagues said, forget it. Yeah, life is not going to emerge because of different factors like oxygen and so on. But he thought he could do it, but he couldn't get any grant to do the science. So he got together with an artist and was doing this experiment as an art science thing. It was not classic science, but it was a way to step out of this pure scientific thing. So there's advantages for many different angles to collaborate.
I would have a question to you, Markus. And the question is, if you would wish that politics, from political side or whatever, it's more supported like this, or what is the solution for this dilemma that it's sometimes hard that the collaboration, or that the scientists are so pressed? Is there anything you could imagine what could be done?
And that's a big question. In a way, what we can see is that when we started to do this, the first time I got involved in bio art was in about 2008, and then it was still kind of completely new. And I can see that now it becomes more and more mainstream. Also, the idea of art and science is more and more mainstream. There are like the Starts Prize, and also the Ars Electronica, and there are more and more organizations and funding is put into it. However, I see this more as a kind of a creative industry approach. So there's still the pressure to come up with new products, to sell something, and you have to be creative to come up with something. And so I think the idea is that when the artists interact with a technology or science, maybe they come up with some new product, you know. So, but this is a very different goal than this open interaction. So I don't know. It's kind of like the question is a tough one. I don't think we can answer this in 3 minutes.
Okay, then let's stay with this.
Just connecting to the question I asked Markus before, because Solmaz, I think for you, science communication is also something you work very much with. How do you, from your side, approach this, or how do you communicate scientists what your practice is about, and what's the value for them? Because it's so much, we talk about resources, we talk about value outcomes. It's always about, you always have to defend yourself. What is the value in the end for this project or for this collaboration? How do you communicate it if you say, if you think about science communication?
Yeah, I think that there was an interesting point that Markus also mentioned, that you can like change your perspective. And because the pressure of credibility is not anymore there when you are working with an artist, you have this freedom in yourself suddenly that, okay, what if that and what if that? And I think I found it very interesting in my discussions with with scientists that when you ask them questions like from your side, like stupid questions, they are very interested, because they may think that they are not allowing themselves usually to ask these such questions. That's one thing that they found from my experience very interesting at the end of the experience, because maybe it was not very clear for them at the beginning. And also the process, as we said, it is interesting for them to see that there is a result, but they don't expect how precious the process is going to be. And at the end, I usually in the talks see that they are very happy about the process and what it brought beside the end results. And also it differs in different projects, but I also found it good to start with their expectation from art, like being beautiful or being communicative with public and being simple to understand, which is usually the expectation what art or visual art basically can do for science. But they may not expect what can they do with art together, which comes through this process. So maybe you don't mention it, but at the end of the project, there are very side products that become more precious than the end product of the science communication. Yeah, so that's fine. I find interesting.
Just connecting to one thought you mentioned, to your artwork or to the process or to the result in the end, being simple to understand. Margit, is this also something that is important for you when you work on your project? Or is it okay to not be understood by everyone?
I think a good artwork is always like appealing at the first moment, but then it does not stop. Then it goes very deep. So I don't think that people understand everything which happens there, but it makes you curious. So you see, and this is because it generates feeling. This is the simple thing what art does. Like if you read an article, this does not, if I'm not maybe too intellectual or too logical person, then all the scientific articles are on the first glance are boring. But if you are confronted with a video of a fish, for example, I have a fish who's like his neurotoxinated, and he always swirls around in the aquarium. And I thought he's dead. And then I look at him and I see the eyes like moving a little bit. I made a video of this. this touches you. You don't have to use many words. So this is simple, but if it's not embedded, like this is what Marco said, like you make nice pictures of something. If that was it, then it's not art, I would say. Then it's something else. So there's something which touches you. This is what art can. It touches you. It's not something with, yeah, it's not just a logical thing. And then but it's also combined with logic, and there's always very often there's a huge metaphysical whatever background. So also, so simple but complicated at the same time.
But also you share your process because you're doing a blog about your project, so you share the process and share glimpses of the process as a result already in a way, which is a form of constant communication also.
Yeah, but it's also a diary from me myself, because you also need some discipline. like as a scientist needs discipline, as an artist you also need some.
One thing, not so much connected to the previous thought now, but what I found interesting and wanted to pick up once again was the topic of funding, which Marcus came up with. And I found it very interesting that he said that scientists found kind of art projects as found it easier to get into art projects or even get resources within art projects for not conventional ideas, which I find very interesting, because from a very like a common point of view, I would say would be that classical science, which ends in results, is way more equipped with resources than arts. So this is an interesting, it's an interesting aspect you came up with. And like, do you have any, like Solmaz or Margit, do you have any, how do you feel about this? Have you experienced something like this before? Or do you have, do you also feel the pressure of, for example, you, Margit, because you're also trained as a biologist, have you worked in classic scientists projects before, where you tried to set up a project with funding? How did you experience this? Or did you move to arts quite quickly then?
No, there's another solution. This is pedagogical contexts, where you need both. Where you need it. I was working in a zoo for several years. So, and if you try to explain nature and the animals to school classes, you need a lot of touching things as well as the information or the thinking about. And so this is also a field where you can use both skills. But I don't have, as you said, like normally art has much less resources than science has. So this is ridiculous. Maybe for a little project, yes, but that's why I asked Marcus before, could there be something, if it's appreciated really from society, that this is something worse? And sometimes it pops up, all people talk about transdisciplinarity, and this is good, but how does this look? And as you said, you also need room for confrontation. And that you really say, we don't know what is the outcome. We just want to have the, like, I also read a little bit, or I wrote with transdisciplinary, and there people said, if it's clear, we have a certain, we want to help this, but we look at, we accept all those perspectives, and what is the best way how to do it? And it's not always science, because always the sentence science has said, and this is the fact, and is maybe sometimes not the best way to treat things.
We have a few minutes left. So we have either the chance to have another thought, a quick one of each of you, or just a wrap up from your side, or I could wrap the session up now. just if you feel you still want to give the audience something that they shouldn't miss, there's one last chance because we have 3 minutes left. So if there's anything you still want to share, feel free.
I just wanted to agree with Margit on the fact that we should not forget that art can also produce knowledge, and that's kind of the knowledge that that is very needed sometimes to find solutions.
That's a good final word.
No, but I think it's good to have more talks like this to find a solution, as you said, in political and other levels to solve these hierarchy problems. And
I would like to say something contradictory. Is that so the idea to kind of deconstruct hierarchy systems, or that science is kind of like are criticized and so on. It's just what science says. These kind of notions over the last years have led to an erosion of the role of science in society. We can see that, for example, when people criticize climate change and so on. And this is actually putting more pressure on the scientists. So, for example, from the European Commission, it's clearly a reaction that they want to show the people what science can do for them. So this means they want the projects to be more streamlined, even more focused, more product oriented, and even harder for artists to interact. So the more kind of like it is challenged that science has something to say, or that there are some special people. I mean, this is actually worsening the situation for in the art science interaction. So every time a group is attacked directly or indirectly, it will put more pressure on them. And the outcome is not always the one you intended to have.
Okay, thank you very much. I will wrap it up because we have 1 minute left, and I want to take the chance to once again remind you we are part of an exhibition in collaboration with the Angewandte Innovation Lab. Thank you for thank you to them for hosting us. And the exhibition is already online, but we will launch it officially by the end of the week. But you can already dive into it. We have some interactive spaces. The URL is www.mayintroduce-alien, like the minus the bindestrich, .com. mayintroduce-alien.com. We're happy for everyone who leaves us a message because you can, the audience can contribute something on the website and listen to something, watch something. We try to set it up interactive. And thank you very much to the audience for joining us today. Thank you to Solmas, Margit, and Markus. And yes, we hope to see you all tomorrow and the day after tomorrow at the same time in the morning. And thank you also to the Angewandte Innovation Lab and all the technical stuff behind the setup. Thank you very much. And it's already 10. Bye.
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 Bye. Thank you.